The sun was just breaking over the horizon, spilling golden light across the quiet suburban school grounds. Birds chirped in the distance, the flag fluttered in the soft breeze, and the scent of freshly cut grass filled the air. It looked like the start of a Diesel, a powerful German shepherd with a coat of deep black and tan frost bolted. "Diesel, Diesel, heel!" Officer Carter's voice cut through the morning air, sharp and commanding. But Diesel wasn't listening. Not this time. Not today. He was running straight for the back lot, a desolate patch of cracked asphalt and rusted-out shipping containers left over from a construction project long forgotten. No one had any business back there, at least that's what they thought. Carter's heart lurched. Something was wrong. Diesel reached the largest container, his nose twitching furiously. He circled it, barking like a creature possessed, deep, guttural, desperate. His paws clawed at the metal walls, his breath fogging the surface. Carter sprinted after him, the weight of his utility belt slamming against his high. The other officers exchanged uneasy glances. A few kids, curious, began to gather at the fence, their chatter rising like Statty. Diesel barked again, sharper this time, and then he whined. That sound, raw, urgent, pleading. And then a faint thud. A mukri. Carter, get the bolt cutters, he barked, his own voice cracking with adrenaline. The team scrambled into action, scattering like ants in a sudden storm. Diesel paced like a caged animal, his nails clacking against the concrete, eyes locked on the container like it was the source of all evil in the world. Carter put a steadying hand on Diesel's neck, feeling the tremble in his muscles, the barely contained energy pulsing through him. For a moment, everything slowed down, and in that heartbeat, Carter realized something. Diesel hadn't just smelled something. He had felt it. Hey there, if you love stories of courageous animals like Diesel, make sure to hit that subscribe button on our channel, Heroes for Animals. Join us as we uncover the incredible moments where animals become heroes in the most unexpected ways. The clatter of tools, snapped Carter back to reality. The bolt cutters gleamed in the morning sun as Officer Ramirez cut through the rusted lock. Carter braced himself, pulse thundering in his ears. The lock snapped with a sharp ping. The metal door groaned and Diesel lunged forward, pawing at the seam as if willing it to open faster. Carter yanked the door wide, and a cloud of stale hot air blasted out, thick, suffocating, wrong. Inside, the light was dim, shadows swallowing the edges of the space. And then from the far corner, a movement. A small, trembling hand reached out, fingers caked in dirt, nails cracked and broken. A boy no older than 10 stumbled forward, eyes wide with terror. His face was streaked with tears and his clothes clung to him, soaked with sweat. Diesel whined and nudged the boy gently, sniffing him as if to say, "You're safe now." The boy collapsed into a heap, sobbing into Diesel's fur. Jesus. Carter breathed, a lump swelling in his throat. "Hang on, buddy. We've got you." But as the boy gasped for air, his voice barely a whisper, Carter caught the faintest words that made his blood run cold. He said, "He's coming back. He's coming back." The officers froze. A chill crept over the group like a shadow slithering through the sunlight. Diesel's ears twitched, his body tensed. His gaze shot past the container, locked onto something, someone, far, beyond the lot. Carter followed Diesel's line of sight, but by the time he turned, there was nothing there. Just the long, empty stretch of road, and a black SUV disappearing into the horizon. The boy's voice was barely more than a ragged breath, the words like smoke escaping cracked lips. He said, "He's coming back." Officer Carter froze. The weight of those words sank into the pit of his stomach, a cold, sick feeling that spread through his veins like ice water. Diesel stood at the boy's side, eyes locked on the distant horizon where the SUV had vanished. His ears twitched, nose working the air, and a low, uneasy growl rumbled from his chest. Carter looked around at the officers gathering near the container. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide. Ramirez swallowed hard, his hand tightening on the handle of the bolt cutters. "Who's coming back?" Carter asked, crouching down to meet the boy's gaze. The kid was shaking so hard his teeth chattered, his shoulders jerking with every breath. He looked up at Carter with eyes that had seen something no child should ever see. Eyes too old for a face that young. He told me not to yell. Said, if I stayed quiet, he'd let me go. But
He lied. He locked me in. I couldn't breathe. I thought I was gonna die.
Carter's jaw tightened, a surge of anger rising in his chest. He glanced at Diesel, who let out a sharp, frustrated bark, as if trying to tell them, we don't have much time. Okay, buddy. Okay, we've got you. Carter said softly, but inside he was already running through scenarios. Who the hell would do something like this, and why target a kid? They called for medical backup. Paramedics rushed in, checking the boy's vitals, wrapping him in a thermal blanket, offering sips of water from a bottle. His fingers were still trembling as Carter paced nearby. Eyes locked on Tit was gone, swallowed by the morning fog. But Carter couldn't shake the image of it. Black, no plates, tinted windows. Someone had been watching. Someone who knew exactly when and where to strike. A knot twisted in his gut. The boy hadn't just ended up in that container. He'd been put there. On purpose. And whoever did it wasn't finished yet. The paramedic approached, voice low, careful not to scare the boy further. He's dehydrated, weak but stable. We'll take him to County General for observation. Carter nodded, but the boy gripped his sleeve suddenly, tugging with a strength that surprised them all. Don't let him take me, he gasped, eyes wild. Don't let him find me. Who, kid? Who's him? Carter asked gently but firmly. The boy shook his head violently, tears spilling down his cheeks. He said it's not just me. There's more. There's more kids. The words hit Carter like a punch to the chest. Diesel barked sharply, spinning in place, nose to the ground, then bolting toward the far side of the lot, toward a row of overgrown bushes by the fence line. Diesel, wait, Carter called, but it was no use. Diesel was on a mission. Carter sprinted after him, heart hammering. Diesel's nose scraped the ground, following an invisible trail, weaving between the bushes. His body was tense, laser-focused. Carter stumbled over a tree root, cursing under his breath, and nearly lost sight of Diesel. But then he heard it. A faint metallic click, and then Diesel's furious barking. Carter burst through the thicket and stopped dead in his tracks. Diesel stood in front of a second container, hidden behind the brush, half sunken into the soft earth. The lock on the door. It was brand new, shiny, heavy-duty. The bark that had been an alarm just minutes ago was now a warning. Carter's skin prickled. He radioed back, Ramirez, bring the bolt cutters, now. The team arrived, breathing hard, adrenaline high. Diesel paced anxiously, ears pinned back, tail rigid as a board. As they worked the lock, Carter crouched low, pressing an ear to the metal. For a second, there was only silence. Then, a faint sound. A soft, almost imperceptible thud, like a fist weakly. Knocking, Carter's breath caught. Hurry up, he snapped. The lock snapped with a sharp crack, and Carter yanked the door open. Inside, 2 children, a boy and a girl, both under 10, huddled together, faces streaked with tears, eyes wide in the dim light. They were tied at the wrists with zip ties, mouths gagged with strips of cloth. Diesel lunged forward, whining, sniffing their faces, nuzzling them gently. Oh my God, Ramirez whispered. Carter's hands shook as he cut the ties, his voice breaking. You're safe now. You're safe. But inside, his mind was racing. 3 kids, 2 containers, 1 man. Whoever had done this, he wasn't just some random predator. This was organized, calculated, and if what the first boy had said was true, there were more. Carter glanced down at Diesel, who stood alert, nose twitching, scanning the air like a radar. Diesel's body stiffened again, head turning slowly toward the road beyond the fence. Carter followed his gaze. Far in the distance, a dark shape emerged, a man in a hoodie walking briskly toward a parked SUV. Carter's pulse exploded. That's him, he shouted. But the man turned his head, just a flash of his profile in the morning sun, and climbed into the vehicle. The engine roared to life, tires kicking up dust, and the SUV sped away, disappearing into the haze. Carter felt the burn of frustration in his chest. They were this close. He looked down at the kids, still shaking, still terrified. Looked at Diesel, who stood by their side like a silent guardian, his breath steady, but his eyes fierce. Carter's jaw set. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Somewhere out there, someone was planning their next move. But so were they. And with Diesel by his side, Carter knew one thing for sure. They were going to hunt this monster down. The SUV was gone. Just like that. A blur of black, metal swallowed by the morning fog, leaving behind a trail of tire tracks in the dust and a growing sense of dread hanging in the air. Carter clenched his fists, feeling the pulse hammering in his temples. His breath came in short, tight bursts, a firestorm of adrenaline crackling through his veins. Diesel stood at his side, chest heaving, fur bristling along his spine. The dog's eyes stayed locked on the horizon like he was burning the image of that SUV into his memory. Carter knew the feeling. It was the same fire in his own chest, the burn of unfinished business. The kids, 3 of them now, sat huddled under thermal blankets in the back of the ambulance. The paramedics worked fast, checking pulses, offering sips of water, murmuring soft reassurances. But the kids barely moved. Their faces were pale, eyes wide and glassy. They looked hollowed out, like the world had shifted under their feet and left them somewhere cold and unfamiliar. Carter crouched beside the first boy, the one they'd found in the first container. He still clung to Diesel like a lifeline, one hand buried deep in the thick fur on Diesel's neck. The boy's voice was barely a whisper. He said, he'd be back. He said if I told anyone, he'd hurt my mom. Carter felt the air leave, his lungs in a sharp rush. He forced himself to speak gently but firmly. No one's gonna hurt your mom, okay? You're safe now. We've got you. But even as the words left his mouth, they tasted like a lie, because deep down Carter knew this wasn't over. He stood up, wiping his hands on his pants, and scanned the lot. Ramirez and Torres were already on the radio, calling in reinforcements, putting out a bolo on the black SUV. A tech van from the crime lab was on the way, but Carter knew how this game worked. The SUV was probably stolen. The plates, if there even were plates, would come back clean or worse, trace back to a dead end. The man in the hoodie? He was a ghost now, slipping through their fingers like smoke. Unless... Carter's eyes narrowed. He turned to Diesel, who was still standing guard, scanning the air with that sixth sense Carter had learned to trust more than anything else. Diesel, he called, his voice low and steady. Find him, boy. Diesel's ears twitched. His nose worked furiously, sniffing the ground, the air, the dust. Then, he bolted. Diesel's paws pounded the dirt as he raced across the field behind the lot. Carter followed, his boots thudding against the dry earth. Diesel slowed near the fence line, his nose buried in the ground, moving in tight circles. Carter squinted, his eyes tracking Diesel's every move. A crumpled piece of paper, a crushed water bottle, and then a shoe. A small, worn-out sneaker, half buried in the dirt. Carter felt a cold shiver race down his spine. He crouched, picking up the shoe carefully, his fingers brushing against something sticky. Blood. His stomach turned. "Ramirez!" he shouted, holding up the shoe. Diesel barked, sharp and urgent, then took off again, following the scent trail like a missile locked, on target. The trail led them to the edge of the woods behind the school, a narrow, winding path that snaked into the trees like a forgotten secret. Diesel stopped, nose to the ground, then looked up at Carter with eyes that seemed to say, "We need to go in." Carter hesitated for a fraction of a second. The woods were thick, dark, and quiet. Too quiet. But he nodded. "Let's move." They pushed into the trees, Diesel leading the way, Carter close behind. The air was damp, the scent of pine and moss heavy in the air. Leaves crunched underfoot, and branches snagged at Carter's sleeves. Every nerve in his body was on high, alert. And then Diesel stopped. His body stiffened, tail straight out, nose quivering. Carter crept forward, heart hammering in his chest. There, through a break in the trees, sat an old, beat-up camper van. The paint was peeling, the tires half flat, and a rusted chain hung from the back door. It looked abandoned, forgotten, but Carter knew better. Diesel let out a low, warning growl. Carter raised a fist, signaling the other officers to circle wide, weapons drawn. He approached the van cautiously, boots crunching on gravel, his gun steady in his hands. Diesel stayed glued to his side, every muscle coiled and ready to strike. "Police, open up!" Carter's voice rang through the clearing, sharp as a gunshot. Silence. Then, movement. A shadow behind the cracked window. Carter's pulse spiked. He stepped closer, voice hardening. "I said, open up." A pause. Then the door creaked open an inch, just enough for a man's face to peek through, a gaunt, hollow-eyed man in his late 40s, beard scraggly, hoodie pulled tight over his head. Carter didn't need to see any more. Get on the ground, now. But the man's eyes flicked to the woods behind Carter. A split-second calculation. And he bolted. Diesel exploded forward like a bullet, teeth bared, a growl ripping from his throat. Carter chased, adrenaline fueling every step. The man crashed. Through the underbrush, branches slashing at his arms, feet slipping on the damp earth. But Diesel was faster. Too fast. With a powerful leap, Diesel clamped onto the man's arm, dragging him down with a guttural snarl. The man screamed, thrashing wildly, but Diesel held firm, jaws locked like a steel trap. Carter caught up, cuffing, the man with shaking hands, breath ragged, chest heaving. "You're done," Carter hissed. The man glared up at him, eyes wild with something that sent a chill down Carter's spine. "This isn't over," he spat. Carter's gut twisted. No, it wasn't over. Not yet. As Carter hauled the man to his feet, Diesel stood at his side, chest rising and falling, eyes sharp and unblinking. They'd won this round, but the battle was far from over, and Carter knew one thing for sure. They'd just scratched the surface of something much, much darker. The man sat in the small, windowless interrogation room, hands cuffed to the cold metal table, sweat beading on his forehead despite the humming AC. His hoodie was stained with dirt, his face pale and lined with tension. Every now and then his eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal, searching for an exit that wasn't there. Carter leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching him with a look that could cut through steel. Diesel lay at his feet, quiet now, but his eyes were locked on the man, unblinking like a loaded gun waiting for the command to fire. "You're not going to talk?" Carter asked, voice low, steady, the kind of tone that said he wasn't in the mood for games. The man sniffed, lips curling into a twisted smirk. "You got nothing on me." Carter tilted his head, letting the silence stretch. He'd been in this game long enough to know the power of a well-timed pause. Diesel shifted, a low, warning growl rumbling deep in his throat. The man flinched, just a little. Carter's eyes narrowed. "Oh, I got plenty on you," he said, voice like gravel. "Let's start with 3 counts of kidnapping. Those kids you stuffed in those containers like cargo? Yeah, they're safe now, thanks to my partner here." He glanced down at Diesel, who gave a sharp, guttural bark. The sound echoed off the cinder block walls like a gunshot. The man swallowed hard, his smirk faltering for the first time. Out in the hallway, Ramirez leaned against the vending machine, watching the monitor feed with a grim expression. He tore open a bag of chips, but didn't touch them. "You think he's gonna crack?" he muttered. Torres, arms folded, shook her head. "He's too calm, like he's waiting for something." "Yeah," Ramirez said, his voice low. "That's what scares me." Back in the room, Carter paced slowly like a lion circling its prey. "You're not working alone," he said, voice sharp. "You expect me to believe this is a one-man operation? You got kids, man. Kids. And you're locking them up in containers. Like they're nothing. Who the hell are you working for?" The man's jaw tightened. His foot tapped a steady, nervous rhythm under the table. Carter leaned in close, voice dropping to a near whisper. Let me guess, you're the grunt, the muscle, the one who gets his hands dirty. But there's someone else, someone pulling the strings. You know what happens to guys like you? The ones at the bottom? They're the first to get cut loose when it all goes sideways. The man's eyes flickered, a crack in the armor. Diesel shifted, ears twitching. His nose lifted slightly as if he could smell the fear rising in the room. Carter pressed harder. You really think they're gonna protect you? When the cops are at their door and the feds are breathing down their necks, you think they're gonna take the fall for you? For a long moment, the man stared at the table, breathing hard, his shoulders tight, then barely audible. You don't know what you're messing with. Carter froze. Try me. Outside, Torres's radio crackled. To life, a sharp burst of static followed by dispatch's voice, tense and clipped. All units be advised. Possible connection to an active Amber Alert. Suspect vehicle, black SUV, no plates. Last seen near county line. Multiple children reported missing. Torres's stomach dropped. She looked at Ramirez, who was already on his feet. Shit, he muttered. They burst into the interrogation room just as Carter slammed his hands on the table. You son of a bitch, he growled. How many kids? The man recoiled, but his smirk crept back like a snake slithering through grass. More than you'll ever find, he said softly, his voice laced with venom. Carter's fist clenched so tight, his knuckles went white. Diesel let out a sharp, angry bark, snapping the tension like a gunshot. Carter stormed out of the room, pacing the hallway, running a hand through his hair. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, a dull hum in the tense silence. Torres followed him out. What's the plan, Sarge? Carter's mind raced, connecting dots, threads weaving into a picture he didn't like. This guy's small time, he muttered, but the operation, it's bigger. Organized, he's just the middleman. He turned to Torres, his eyes hard. Pull every missing persons report from the last 6 months. Focus on kids under 12. Cross-reference with truck routes, shipping. Manifests, abandoned properties, anything that smells off. Torres nodded, already moving. Back in the room, the man sat in silence, staring at Diesel. The dog's gaze was steady, unblinking, like he was reading the man's soul. For a moment, something flickered in the man's eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. He shifted in his chair, glancing nervously at the clock on the wall. Carter noticed. Waiting for someone? He asked, stepping back in. The man didn't answer, but the tension in his shoulders was all the response Carter needed. His phone buzzed. An incoming call. Carter glanced down. Unknown number. His stomach dropped. He answered, voice steady. Carter. Voice distorted, cold and sharp as a blade slid through the line. You're in over your head, Sergeant. Back off, or the next kid won't be so lucky. The line went dead. Carter stared at the phone, heart racing, a cold sweat breaking across his forehead. Diesel let out a low, warning growl, his body rigid, ears pricked forward. Carter looked at the man in the chair, who now wore a sick, twisted grin. This wasn't just about 3 kids in a container. This was a message. A war had just been declared, and Diesel, God bless him, was ready for the fight. The sun was dipping low behind the saw, hills painting the sky in streaks of burnt orange and purple. A faint hum of cicadas buzzed in the warm evening air as Carter leaned against the hood of his cruiser, staring at the quiet stretch of road that led away from the school. He gripped a paper cup of black coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt motor oil but kept him sharp. The cold metal of his badge weighed heavy against his chest, but it was nothing compared to the weight settling in his gut. 3 kids rescued, 1 man in custody, and still, more than you'll ever find. Those words haunted him. Beside him, Diesel sat alert, head high, ears twitching at every passing sound. His breath puffed in steady bursts, but his body was tense, like a spring coiled tight. Carter glanced down. Diesel's tail gave a single sharp thump against the gravel, a silent signal. I'm ready. They both were. The break they needed came just after dark. Torres burst through the station doors holding a tablet in one hand, her ponytail bouncing, behind her like a signal flare. "Sarge, you need to see this," she said, her voice clipped and urgent. She set the tablet on the table, spinning it toward Carter. On the screen, a grainy traffic cam photo. The black SUV, same model, same tinted windows, caught at a stoplight 5 miles from the school. But it wasn't the SUV that made Carter's stomach flip. It was the background, an old rusted sign barely visible behind the vehicle. Hollow. Creek storage. Private property. Carter stared at it, his mind racing. Hollow Creek was an abandoned industrial park on the outskirts of town. Half the warehouses condemned, the rest leased out for cash-only storage units. A place where people dumped what they didn't want anyone else to find. He looked at Diesel, who stared back at him with eyes that seemed to say, "Let's go." They rolled up fast and quiet, lights off, engines low. The place looked like a graveyard of forgotten industry. Rusting chain-link fences, cracked pavement sprouting weeds, rows of shipping containers and storage units stretching into the darkness like a maze. Carter killed the engine and stepped out. The air smelled like dust, oil, and something sour underneath it all. Diesel leapt from the cruiser, paws hitting the ground soft but sure. He sniffed the air, his body going rigid. His tail pointed like a compass. Carter whispered, "You got something, boy?" Diesel didn't answer, not in words, but his body said everything. He lowered his head and moved forward, nose skimming the ground, weaving through the rows like he was following an invisible thread. Torres and Ramirez followed, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the shadows. The place was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the soft pad of Diesel's paws and the crunch of gravel under boots. Diesel stopped suddenly, body stiff. He turned sharply toward a storage unit with a padlock hanging loose. Carter signaled the team, raising a clenched fist. They stacked up, Torres on the left, Ramirez on the right, Carter at point. Diesel let out a low, almost imperceptible growl. Carter's pulse hammered in his ears. He took a slow, steadying breath, then nodded. Torres yanked the door open. Carter moved fast, gun up, sweeping the small space, nothing. Just a dusty concrete floor, a broken chair, and a wall of boxes. At first glance, it looked like junk, but Carter's eyes narrowed. The boxes were all the same size, stacked too neatly, too precise. He stepped closer and saw it. Each box had a small sticker on the side, numbers and barcodes. Torres frowned. "What the hell is this?" Carter's gut told him this wasn't storage, this was inventory. Diesel sniffed at one of the boxes, whining low in his throat. Carter knelt, cut the tape, and flipped the lid. Inside, clothes. Kids' clothes. Neatly. Folded. A chill ran down Carter's spine. He opened another box. More clothes. Shoes. Backpacks. And then, in the third box, a stack of IDs. School IDs. Photos of smiling kids, names printed neatly underneath. Some of the kids they'd just rescued. Others, Carter's throat went dry. "Jesus Christ," Ramirez muttered behind him. Diesel moved again, this time to the back wall. He sniffed along the baseboards, then froze at a spot where the concrete looked different. Carter crouched down, running, his hand along the surface, there, barely visible, a faint outline, a trapdoor. He signaled. Torres and Ramirez raised their weapons, hearts pounding. Carter grabbed the handle and pulled. The door groaned open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading underground. A wave of stale, damp air rose up, mixed with something else. Fear. Diesel growled, the fur along his spine bristling like a wolf staring down prey. Carter's voice was low, a quiet promise in the dark. "Let's finish this." They moved down the stairs, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was close, heavy. At the bottom, a narrow hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors. Some were closed, some cracked open. Diesel padded forward, nose twitching, ears flicking side to side. Carter heard it then. Soft sounds, muffled cries. He swallowed hard. His flashlight beam landed on the first door. A child's hand reached through the bars, trembling, pale. Carter's breath caught. Oh my God. Diesel barked, a short, sharp burst that said, "Move, now." Carter called into his radio, voice steady but shaking with rage. "Dispatch, this is Sergeant Carter. We've got a situation, multiple hostages, possible child trafficking ring. Send everything you've got." He turned to Torres and Ramirez, eyes blazing. "Let's bring these kids home." Diesel stood ready, muscles taut, eyes fierce. Because tonight wasn't just about saving lives. It was about taking down the monsters hiding in the dark. The narrow hallway smelled like fear and mildew, a suffocating mix that clung to Carter's skin as he gripped his flashlight tighter. Diesel moved ahead of him, nose low, tail stiff, a silent arrow cutting through the darkness. Every muscle in Carter's body was tense, humming with adrenaline. Behind them, Torres and Ramirez scanned. The doors, weapons raised, hearts pounding. The quiet was too quiet. The muffled sobs and soft whimpers they'd heard moments ago had faded, swallowed by the thick, stale air. Diesel paused at a steel door near the end of the hall, barking once, sharp, insistent, no hesitation. Carter's pulse kicked up. He pressed an ear to the door. A voice, low, calm, menacing. "Keep quiet, or you know what happens." Carter's blood turned to ice. He gave a sharp nod to his team. Torres raised her weapon. Ramirez steadied the crowbar. "On my count," Carter whispered, heart slamming against his ribs. Diesel growled low, the sound vibrating in Carter's bones. 3, 2, 1. The door exploded inward, wood splintering, metal groaning. The room inside was small, dimly lit by a bare bulb swinging from the ceiling. 4 kids huddled in a corner, wide-eyed, faces streaked with tears, some barely holding on to each other. And in front of them, a man, tall, gaunt, the same hollow-eyed look as the one they'd arrested before. But this one, he was different. He stood calmly as if he'd been expecting them, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Carter leveled his gun. "Hands where I can see them, now." The man didn't flinch. He raised his hands slowly, palms out, but his eyes burned with something cold, calculated. "I told you," he said, voice smooth as oil. "You're in over your head." Carter's heart hammered. Ramirez moved to secure the man, cuffs snapping into place. Torres rushed to the kids, her voice soft, soothing. But Carter, his gaze swept the room, something gnawing at the edge of his mind. Diesel barked once, loud and sharp, and darted toward the back wall, pawing at a stack of crates. Carter's stomach dropped. He yanked a crate aside and saw it, a hidden trapdoor. Just like before. He yanked it open. A dark tunnel stretched beyond, narrow and winding, snaking into the earth like the throat of a beast. Diesel lunged forward, barking wildly, tail high and rigid. Carter didn't hesitate. He followed. They ran. Down the tunnel. Through the dark. The air grew colder, heavier. The walls closed in. Diesel's growl grew louder, fiercer, like he was pulling Carter along on pure instinct. Finally, the tunnel opened into a cavernous room, a hidden underground chamber lit by flickering floodlights. Carter skidded to a stop, breath ragged. It wasn't just a hideout. It was a hub, stacks of crates, tattered blankets, old mattresses, crumpled papers. And cages, rows of cages. Most were empty, but some, a soft, heartbreaking cry echoed through the space. A little girl, no older than 6, sat huddled in a cage, clutching a stuffed rabbit with matted fur. Her eyes locked onto Carter, wide and terrified. Diesel rushed to her, whining, pawing at the lock. Carter's hands shook as he worked the latch, metal cold and stubborn beneath his fingers. Finally, it gave way. The girl flung herself into Carter's arms, sobbing into his chest. "You're safe," he whispered, voice breaking. "You're safe now." They moved fast after that, clearing the space, securing the kids, calling in, backup. It felt like a blur, voices crackling over radios, Sirens wailing in the distance, Torres directing EMTs as they rushed in. Carter sat on the steps, watching it all unfold, his body numb, heart heavy. Diesel lay beside him, his head resting on Carter's boot, his breathing steady but his eyes still sharp, still watching. "Good boy," Carter murmured, running a hand over Diesel's ears. "You did good, buddy." Diesel thumped his tail, once soft and slow. The man in cuffs was loaded into a squad car, his head ducked low, that sick smirk still playing at the corner of his mouth. Carter watched him go, jaw clenched. They'd shut down this operation, but Carter knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. There were more monsters out there. More kids waiting for someone to hear their cries. But they had Diesel, and as long as they had him, Carter knew they wouldn't stop fighting. Later that night, Carter sat in the quiet of the station, staring at the case file in front of him. The hum of the vending machine filled the silence, the smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. He looked at Diesel, stretched out on the floor, finally at peace. Carter's voice was quiet, almost to himself. Who knew a dog's bark could save? "Lives?" He leaned back, exhaling slowly. There was still so much work to do. But tonight they'd brought those kids home, and that was enough. Thank you so much for following Diesel's story with us. What do you think makes a true hero? Someone like Carter, or someone like Diesel? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more incredible stories like this one. See you in the next story.